These days, teachers are hearing a lot about meeting the needs of today's learners, or sometimes you'll hear the phrase meeting the needs of our 21st century learners. The graphic you see on the screen shows the standards that the International Society for Technology and Education has adopted for students, and they also have a set for teachers, administrators, and coaches. This discussion is meant to take a 30,000-foot view of this topic, starting with our learners' needs and thinking about how those needs impact our classroom practice. We hear many people referring to 21st century skills, especially in reference to the changing workforce of which our students will become a part. Take a moment to think about and talk with the people around you about these terms that you see on the screen. You might consider responding to the following question. Are there any terms that are unfamiliar and require some new learning or discussion among your colleagues? Let's come to some consensus. Do we all agree that our students need skills in these areas? Okay, now that you've done that, most of us will notice that many of these terms are familiar. We have always wanted students to be good communicators who can collaborate, problem solve, and think critically and creatively. Citizenship is a big focus in most school communities, and now we're beginning to think about how we need to extend that concept, since our students will live, work, and play in both physical and virtual spaces. In discussing these terms with teachers, it may be that the 21st century literacies and information fluencies stand apart as quite different from the others. A couple of big ideas emerge on the next two slides. Change is a given. Resiliency for today's learners needs to include the ability to be flexible and to continually manage new learning and change. There are new literacies emerging in the digital world all the time, and to be able to move between and understand these new literacies is and will be increasingly of importance to ourselves and our students. Change is one of the certainties of the 21st century, and technology is impacting all areas of our lives, inside and outside of school. Take a look at some of the shifts that are occurring related to learning and teaching. This would be a really good time for you to have a discussion with your colleagues, maybe a turn and talk or a discussion out with the wider group. So, of these shifts that we see on the screen, what resonates with you? Do we acknowledge that these shifts are indeed happening? Are they happening for teachers and for students? Take a few minutes now to share some examples of the shifts that you are experiencing in your own teaching and learning. Okay, now that you've done that, some of the questions that many educators still have when they think about this shift during the 21st century are things like this. How do digital tools lend themselves to learning anytime, anywhere? What are the implications of being able to learn 24/7? How might we use technology to learn in a participatory culture, for example with social media or blogging or virtual learning communities? When technology can break down the walls of the classroom and offer the opportunity to invite in experts, collaborate with other people around the world, and participate in a networked community, how does that change our role as teachers? What changes when all the information in the world is at your fingertips? One of the most challenging parts of being an educator is making sure that our beliefs about learning and teaching align with our practices. By viewing the previous slides and using the discussion prompts, you have likely come to some common understandings about the needs of today's learners. Now let's look at how these beliefs play out in terms of your classroom practice. Use each of the following 3 slides to start a discussion. If we believe the following statements to be true, then what does that mean for our classroom practice? If, for example, resources are no longer scarce and the teacher doesn't hold all of the knowledge, how does this affect our teaching practice? What needs to change? If we believe that students are producers and not just consumers of media, how does this affect our teaching practice? What needs to change? If we believe that classrooms are not just physical spaces, how does this affect our teaching practice? What needs to change? Shifting our practice isn't easy, and it often starts with just one step at a time. In closing, consider what you've determined as one need for your students and create an action step, something that you could put in place in your classroom to better meet those needs. One of the things that I wanted to do was be explicit about the strategies we were using in this discussion. So I hope that by using consensus building, turn and talk, thinking prompts, and a ticket out the door, you have found some relevant takeaway for your own learning.